I'm Dr. Tasia White, and you're listening to Things My Boss Never Told Me. Hello, and welcome back to Things My Boss Never Told Me. I am your gracious host, Dr. Tasia White, and I am so excited for you to be here for this episode. So before we begin, I just want to take a moment and just acknowledge the fact that we are on episode number 14, which is crazy for me to think about because it's hard to believe that it was 2 years ago that I decided that I wanted to do this. And I'm just really excited about just where things are going and just how much has happened since the start of this podcast in September of 2021. So I'm excited. I'm glad that you're here. And let's just go ahead and get into this episode. So in our last episode, we had a special guest, Kevin J. Turner, who shared his leadership journey and his perspective and the significance of self-awareness. And so I wanted to focus this episode on that very topic, just getting a deeper sense of awareness of who we are as leaders and how we go about expressing that. So when it comes to our leadership journey, I feel like there are three main questions we have to be able to answer about ourselves before we can really make any kind of progress. Who am I as a person? Where am I going? And how am I getting there? So let's break those down a little bit. So who am I as a person? So understanding who we are is so crucial, not only as a leader, but just in life in general. Because what I found is that when we lose our sense of self, we sort of get this inflated idea of who we are, and we lose sight of like the things happening around us, or we lose sight of like our values and the things that are really crucial for our overall well-being. Like we can get so caught up in work and trying to strive for something that we may not even necessarily care about or want because we're losing our sense of self. And so understanding the self is the first thing that we have to pay attention to. It's the thing that keeps us grounded. It's the thing that keeps us human and connected to other humans. And so there are a couple of things that I feel are crucial for us to understand in terms of the awareness of self. So when it comes to understanding who we are, I feel like it's important to first acknowledge that way too often when we introduce ourselves and when we say who we are, we tend to focus more on what we do, like our occupation or our profession, as opposed to who we are as individuals. And I don't know if that's maybe a cultural thing, like here in the United States, but that's just sort of something that I've noticed a lot in terms of meeting different people, whether it be in professional or social settings. One of the first things that tend to come up is our profession. Like when we're asked about who we are, our job titles or our professional titles tend to come up first. But we are so much more than our occupations. And yet that tends to be our first identity, especially when we're meeting new people. And there are many different reasons why, we may do that. For some of us, it may be that's just the only identity we have because we are so focused on our work. For others, it could be about ego and just needing to express that. And so for this first one, I'm really focusing on the character piece. And that's what I want you to think about for yourself. If you take the titles away, if you take the job away, who are you? What do you stand for? What are your values? Things like that. So here are a couple of the things that I encourage you to think about. One, our values, which is something that we've talked about in previous episodes. But understanding our values is part one. And then part two is looking at the actions that we're taking that actually demonstrate or support that particular value. So prime example, I value leadership development. And I feel like this podcast is certainly the action that I take to demonstrate that. It's something that I'm passionate about. And so I take the time and energy to do this and to do workshops and to do different trainings and things like that, because leadership development is something that's important to me. Or even giving advice and coaching people who I may see struggling or need just a little extra support. And so to me, that demonstrates that leadership is something that I value, or education is something that I value. So how I value education is demonstrated in my social media posts and making sure that the content that I'm putting out there is informative in some way, or helps to offer a different perspective, or is thought-provoking in some way. And so those are just a couple of examples of just making that connection of like understanding what our true values are, and then looking for the actions that demonstrate that that is truly something that we value. So let's say there is something that you do care about or that you do value, but you can't necessarily find the action to support that value, then this is the perfect time to go about setting that intention. So for example, it's one thing to say that I value family life, but then I prioritize work over family opportunities, right? If you do value family, then perhaps now is the time to look at how you can go about having the right actions to support that value. And so it might be changing your schedule so that you can have more quality time with family, or it could be scheduling some family outings, or however it fits you. But the intent behind this is just knowing your values and making sure that you connect your actions to those values. Next is understanding the things that we are passionate about. Like, what is the thing that truly drives us? Is it a topic that we have a strong interest in? Is it certain people? Is it something from our childhood? Just understanding like what is the thing that we are truly passionate about. And so, for example, leadership development is something that I am passionate about. And it's something that I've been passionate about for a long time. And if you go back to episode number 1, I talked about just the leadership opportunities I had when I was younger and how that helped to shape who I am now as a leader and my interest in leadership. And I feel like that just continues to grow as my passion for leadership continues to expand. And so for you, it's understanding like, what is that passion? What is that thing for you that you just can't get enough of, that you just continue to research or continue to dive into in multiple ways? Like, I think about my own journey, and 2 of my degrees have leadership in them. Like, if that's not something, I don't know what is. And I think about the books on my shelf, which have some kind of leadership in it in some way. And the stuff that I seek out in terms of my growth and development are almost always connected to leadership in some way. And so I invite you to think about, like, what is your thing? Like, what is the thing that you have a strong interest in, that you find yourself gravitating towards, that maybe isn't a part of your job, but you're interested in it anyway, or something that just keeps coming back to you every once in a while. Even if you take a little bit of a break from it, you still find yourself getting drawn back into it. Like, what is that thing for you? I have a coworker who she's really into writing. And so it's like, despite what she does at work, she always goes back to writing and like has all of these amazing stories and just stuff that she's working on. And so for me, that tells me that that's her passion, right? That's the thing that she's really passionate about. It's about coming up with these stories and then finding ways to tell those stories. And so something that I will give to you as homework is maybe take a week or 2 and look at the thing that you're passionate about. Even if it's not something that you are currently working on, think back to like something that you find yourself maybe coming back to every once in a while, and pay attention to whether or not that thing excites you. If it's something that you keep putting off, that's probably not your passion. But if it's something that you find yourself like missing it when you don't do it, I would say that probably falls in the passion area. So do a little bit of internal research to determine what that thing is that you're passionate about. And it may be more than one thing, which is totally fine. But either way, understanding your passion, I feel, is important for that deeper understanding of self. And so we've talked about knowing your values. We've talked about understanding what your passion is. And so the other component that is related to having a deeper understanding of self is, what is the thing that you're good at? I feel like that's the one thing that I feel like we tend to overlook the most because it's something that just is second nature to us. And so part of your homework for this episode is to also look at, what is the thing that you're really good at? Like, the thing that people come to you the most for, or the thing that maybe you excel at in your work. That's the other thing I feel is so crucial in terms of understanding who we are as individuals. And so in my case, I know that teaching and education is something that I'm really good at. And this is something that not only that I feel strongly about, but also I've received positive feedback on as well. Like, I'm really good at explaining things in the way that is simple. I can take a very complex concept and simplify it in a way that is helpful for the people that I'm explaining it to, and establishing a basis of understanding. Like, that's my thing. Like, I want us to be on the same page. And so in order to do so, I like to explain things in a simplified way. And while it was a passion of mine years ago, in many ways, I'm still an educator. However, in my younger years, I wouldn't have necessarily called myself a good teacher. And that's due to just doubt and just being self-conscious about things. And so now I feel like I'm at the point where it's the thing that people tend to come to me for. So for all of you listening, it's important to think about, what is your thing? What is the thing that everyone tends to come to you for, or everyone compliments you on, or feels that you're good at, even if you don't necessarily think that you're good at it? Because what may be holding you back from seeing yourself as being good at it could just be self-doubt, which everyone experiences at some point, myself included. But that's not the purpose of this activity. It's to just focus on like the thing that we're good at that maybe other people recognize within us if we can't necessarily identify what that thing is. I share all of that to say, spend some time getting to know yourself and who you are. The best way to do that is to understand, what are your values? What are the things that you're good at? And what are the things that you're passionate about? Then you'll have a much deeper understanding of who you are as a person. Now, the next question, where am I going? I feel like one of the best ways to understand where you're going is to take a step back and look at what we want our legacy to be and what kind of impact do you want to leave, whether it be on your organization or your community or even the world at large. Like, what is it that you want people to remember you for? So there's this one activity that I think is helpful in terms of facilitating this thought process of where am I going, that I'm going to share with you. And this is something that I've encouraged my clients to do. It's one of the activities I've included in my 22 Happier You coaching program. And I'll admit, I can't remember exactly where it came from. And so I apologize to the original person who created this because I would love to give you the credit. But anyway, the idea is that you imagine your 100th birthday. You know, whenever you celebrate a major birthday, like turning 100, for example, like that's a pretty big deal, right? And so imagine like you're at that point and you have your loved ones who are sharing your life story and sharing all of the great things that you've done. And so what are those great things that you've done? What is it that they're sharing on that day in celebration of you? The idea is that you're creating a vision for your life and then determining the steps now to work towards that vision. And so it's sort of like having this grand plan or idea for our lives in terms of our legacy, but then looking at the here and now and determining what can I do that will help me to get to that place. And it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be this grandiose action plan with specific milestones. It could just be this gentle reminder of like where we want our lives to go, and understanding that the actions that we take today, like what we're doing now, will help us to get that much closer to that vision. Now, when it comes to understanding where we're going, I feel like the thing that we have to keep in mind is that even if we have a plan for where we want to go, we also have to be flexible about that plan and understand that that plan may change. Things in life may happen that may alter that plan, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have a plan or have a goal to strive towards. It just means that we have to be flexible and agile in pursuit of that thing. All right, so just to recap, we've talked about who we are, where we're going, and now we're going to talk about how we're going to get there. So I've just talked about just having this great vision for our lives and how we're going to be celebrated on our 100th birthday. And so the next step is determining the how. I feel like far too often when we are in pursuit of something, we may forget to take that step back to explore the how. How am I going to get there? And so it may require us to do a little bit of research and to do a little exploring. The idea is to focus on how do you feel that gap between where you are now versus where you see yourself going. And what will serve us well is to just do some kind of brainstorming on what we think may get us closer to that goal, or even doing some research on the thing that may help us get us closer to that goal or that vision for our lives. And so perhaps there are new things that you need to learn, or certain experiences that you need to have first, or certain skills that you need to develop in order to get there. Let's determine what those things are. For example, let's say traveling the world is one of the things that you see yourself doing long term. Great. Perhaps one of the things that you may need to do to help get you there is to learn a couple of different languages. And so that could be one of the things that you put on your list of like something that you need to learn or something that you need to do in pursuit of that vision for your life. And so the idea is that once you have this list of things that you need to learn, or relationships you may need to develop, or skills you may need to acquire, you can create your action plan around those things. And so if it is learning a language or taking a workshop or cultivating a certain kind of relationship, what are the things that you can do right now in pursuit of that thing? The how is the learning experience. It's trying these different things. And even if it doesn't work, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a setback or that it's a failure. It just means that you're honing in on the things that do work for you, and you're honing in on what is necessary to get you closer to your goal. And so getting there doesn't necessarily have to be something completely scripted and detail oriented. It's really about having some kind of framework or outline to work towards. And it's okay if we don't know exactly how to get there or what specific steps we may need to take, because when we are pursuing something that may seem much greater than where we are in the present, it can feel overwhelming. It can feel daunting, scary even. And so one of the ways to make it less scary or less intimidating or less overwhelming is to sort of break it down into smaller chunks. And so that smaller chunk could be just learning a new skill, talking to the right people, or doing a little bit of research. And so of the 3 questions that we're answering in this episode, the third question, how we're getting there, should be the least resistant one, because that's the one that we should have the most patience with. That's the question that we need to take our time with exploring and cultivating and developing, and just understanding that we don't necessarily have to have the answer today or tomorrow or even a year from now. If anything, this is where we get to have the most fun, because we get to explore and be creative and try something new and different, and just understanding that it doesn't have to look a certain way for us to get there. It's just seeing what works and what doesn't work. And so my piece of advice with question number 3 in terms of how you're getting there is to have fun with it. Find ways to incorporate joy. Try not to be so rigid or caught up in how it should look, because the how is the journey, and the journey is the thing that you're going to remember the most. And so you might as well have fun with it. You might as well do something out of the ordinary So when I think about my own path, I just recognize the moments where it was stressful or where it wasn't a lot of fun. And I just felt like I missed out on so much because I was just so caught up in the rigidness of it that now I'm to the point where it's like, I know I'm going to get there at some point, even though my plan doesn't necessarily have a step A, step B, step C, like that's totally fine. It's just making sure that I'm intentional about doing something that I feel will get me closer to my goal. So just to quickly recap, in terms of our own journey of self-discovery, we have to understand first who we are, and that includes understanding our values, our passion, and the things that we're good at. Next, having this idea or vision of our life and where we see ourselves going. And then lastly, understanding how we're getting there, but doing so from a place that is fun and joyful, because that's the journey itself. All right, so let's transition into today's gratitude. While it's not much of a list in this episode, I do feel like it's important for me to acknowledge the significance of this podcast and how it is contributing to my overall vision for my life. And even though I'm not exactly sure how it directly connects, it still gives me an opportunity to express myself in ways that are significant. It allows me to pursue something that I'm passionate about and do something that I'm actually good at. And so this podcast has just been a wonderful experience that I just continue to enjoy each and every time, even when I don't know what to say, even when I stumble, even when I feel stuck, I'm still having fun no matter what. And I am really grateful for just being able to teach and share knowledge in a way that's just a little different than maybe I have in the past. Okay, so for this episode's affirmation, I have all of the tools and resources I need to be a visionary leader. I have an ideal vision of my life, and I am pursuing it with passion. And so that's the main thing I want you to take away from this episode, and just having the tools to help you pursue that. And so in our next episode, I will have another guest, and I'm excited for them to share their leadership journey because I feel like it has been inspirational for me, and I think that it will be inspirational for you too. Okay? So with that said, thank you so much for listening and have a great day. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Things My Boss Never Told Me. Before you go, please make sure that you like and subscribe down below. Also, I included a few recommended videos for you to check out. Thank me later.